Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one that will stay with you long after it ends, a quiet moment of sadness that turned into something so powerful. It stunned everyone who witnessed it. It started on a chilly evening. In a small neighborhood tucked far away from the glittering lights of the city, the streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavier when you're alone. Inside a tiny, worn-down apartment, a little girl named Alina sat by the window, her chin resting on her knees as she watched other children playing outside. It was her birthday, but there were no balloons, no decorations, no laughter echoing through the room, to silence. And the faint hum of the ceiling fan above her. Her mother was working a late shift at a local factory, trying to make enough to keep food on the table. She had promised she would come home early today, maybe bring something small to celebrate. But as the minutes turned into hours, the promise slowly faded into uncertainty. Alina didn't complain. She never did. Instead, she whispered softly to herself, maybe next year. But something inside her still hoped. She stood up, walked to the small kitchen, and opened the fridge. It was nearly empty, just a bottle of water and a half-eaten piece of bread. She smiled weakly, broke the bread into 2 pieces, and placed them on a plate. "Happy birthday to me," she murmured. She even tried to sing the birthday song, her voice trembling halfway through. "I had no cake on my birthday," she said quietly, almost like a confession to the empty room. At that exact moment, something unexpected happened. Outside her building, a sleek black car slowed to a stop. Inside sat a young billionaire named Arman Malik. At just 32, he had built a global tech empire, known for his sharp mind and even sharper business instincts. People admired him, feared him, envied him, but very few truly knew him. He wasn't supposed to be there. His driver had taken a wrong turn while navigating through the older parts of the city. Arman had been on his way back from a hype meeting, his mind still occupied with numbers, deals, and deadlines. But then he heard it. A faint voice, a child's voice. He raised his hand, signaling the driver to stop. "Did you hear that?" he asked. The driver shook his head, confused. Arman opened the car door slowly and stepped out into the quiet street. The voice came again, softer this time, drifting through the open window of Alina's apartment. "I had no cake on my birthday." Something about those words hit him harder than he expected. He stood still for a moment, listening. Then, without saying a word, he walked toward the building. The stairs creaked under his polished shoes as he climbed up. He followed the faint light coming from one of the apartments and gently knocked on the door. Inside. Alina froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, she walked to the door and opened it, just a little. Peeking out, standing there was a man she had never seen before, tall, well-dressed, and completely out of place in her world. "Yes?" she asked cautiously. Arman looked down at her, his expression softening. "Hi, I'm sorry to disturb you," he said. "I heard someone say it's their birthday." Alina hesitated, then nodded. "It's mine." Arman glanced behind her, noticing the empty room, the dim lighting, the plate with 2 pieces of bread sitting on the table. "Where's your cake?" he asked gently. Alina looked down, her fingers tightening around the edge of the door. "Don't have one," she replied. "It's okay." That simple sentence, "it's okay," broke something inside him, because he knew it wasn't okay. Not for a child to feel this way on her birthday, not for anyone. "Would you wait here for a few minutes?" he asked. Alina looked confused but nodded slowly. Arman turned and rushed down the stairs, pulling out his phone as he walked. Within minutes, the quiet street transformed into something extraordinary. First came a delivery van, then another car, then a small team of people carrying boxers, decorations, and something large covered in a white cloth. Neighbors began peeking out of their doors, whispering among themselves, "What's going on? Who is that man?" Back inside, Alina sat nervously, unsure of what was happening. Then came another knock. She opened the door again, her eyes widened in disbelief. The hallway was filled with light, colors, and people holding balloons. And in the center stood Arman, holding the biggest birthday cake she had ever seen. It was covered in bright frosting, topped with candles that flickered like tiny stars. "Happy birthday, Alina," he said with a smile. For a moment, she couldn't speak. She just stared, trying to understand if this was real. "Is this for me?" she whispered. "Yes," he replied. "All of it." Tears filled her eyes as she stepped forward. The small apartment that once felt empty was suddenly alive with laughter, music, and warmth. Decorations covered the walls, balloons floated near the ceiling, and the table was filled with food, more than Alina had ever seen at once. Neighbors were invited in, children gathered around, and for the first time that day, the room felt full. But Arman didn't stop there. He knelt beside Alina and said, "Make a wish." She closed her eyes tightly, holding her breath as she whispered something only she could hear. Then she blew out the candles. Everyone cheered, and in that moment, something changed. Not just for Alina, but for everyone watching. Because this wasn't just about a cake, it was about being seen, about being heard, about someone noticing a quiet sadness and choosing to do something about it. Later that evening, Alina's mother rushed home, worried and exhausted. But when she opened the door, she froze. The room was glowing with light and joy. Her daughter was laughing, surrounded by people, holding a slice of cake with the biggest smile she had ever seen. What? What is this? She asked, overwhelmed. Armand stepped forward and introduced himself, explaining everything. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to thank him, but he gently stopped her. No need, he said. She deserved this. But the story didn't end there. The next day, something even more unexpected happened. Armand returned, this time, not with balloons or cake, but with a plan. He had arranged for Alina to be enrolled in one of the best schools in the city. He offered to support her education, her dreams, her future, not as charity, but as a promise. A promise that no child should ever feel invisible again. Years later, that little girl who once said, "I had no cake on my birthday," stood on a stage, receiving an award for academic excellence, and in the audience sat Armand, watching, quietly, a proud smile on his face. Because sometimes, the smallest moments, the quietest words can create the biggest changes. All it takes is one person willing to listen. So if today you see someone struggling, someone feeling alone, someone quietly wishing for something they think they'll never have, don't ignore it, because you might just have the power to change their entire world. And that's the end of today's story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. See you in the next one.